Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to share and subscribe the channel. It was a day etched into humanity's collective memory, the arrival of the Ashari. Their ships, vast and glimmering like floating cities of light, descended into Earth's atmosphere with an elegance that seemed almost otherworldly, unlike the grim, mechanical vessels depicted in science fiction. The Ashari ships were beautiful. Their surfaces shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed like the gentle rhythm of a heartbeat. I stood among the crowd gathered in Unity Square, neck craned to the sky, heart pounding with equal parts awe and trepidation. As a linguist and cultural anthropologist, I had long dreamed of the day humanity would encounter another intelligent species. Still, no academic preparation could have steeled me for the reality of seeing them with my own eyes. The first Ashari delegation emerged from their ship in a procession that was as much a performance as it was an introduction. Their figures were tall and willowy, their movements fluid, as if they were dancing rather than walking. What struck me most were their faces, eerily human yet undeniably alien. Their eyes, larger than ours, shimmered like molten silver, and their skin glowed faintly with shifting patterns of light that seemed to reflect their emotions. Each step they took was accompanied by an audible hum, a resonance that seemed to touch not just the ears but the soul. The world watched with bated breath as the leader of the delegation, a woman named Sirin Vora, stepped forward to address us. She was mesmerizing. Her bioluminescent patterns formed intricate, ever-changing constellations on her skin, and her voice carried a melodic quality, as if every word were part of a song. Through advanced translation technology, her message came through loud and clear. The Ashari sought not war but alliance. They came not to conquer, but to collaborate your world, she said, her voice echoing through the square. You stand on the precipice of greatness or ruin. We offer our hand to guide you toward the former, if you are willing. The crowd erupted into a mix of applause, gasps, and murmurs. The media had a field day dissecting every aspect of the encounter, from the Ashari's technological superiority to their potential motivations. Were they truly altruistic, or was there a hidden agenda? Speculation ran rampant. For me, however, the focus quickly shifted from the grand spectacle to something far more personal. Days after the Ashari's arrival, I received an unexpected call from the Global Alliance Council, the governing body tasked with managing Earth's relations with the Ashari. As one of the foremost experts in cross-cultural communication, I had been selected to serve as a cultural liaison between humanity and the Ashari. The assignment felt like a dream come true and a nightmare waiting to happen. The weight of representing humanity in the eyes of an alien species was overwhelming, yet I couldn't deny the thrill of it. I was about to step into uncharted territory, to become a bridge between two worlds. My first meeting with Sirin Vora was both fascinating and humbling. She was not just the leader of the legation, but also one of the Ashari's foremost scholars, with expertise spanning linguistics, anthropology, and diplomacy. If I am a bridge between our species, then you are the other half of it, human, she greeted me in her melodic tone, her silver eyes studying me with an intensity that made me feel as though she could see straight into my soul. You are the one tasked with teaching us about your kind, a formidable challenge, I imagine. I cleared my throat, trying to appear more composed than I felt, and replied, and you're the one tasked with teaching us about yours. I'd say the challenge is mutual. She smiled a subtle, enigmatic smile. Indeed, let us hope we are up to the task. The initial days of our collaboration were a whirlwind of activity. We spent hours discussing the intricacies of our languages, our histories, our values. Sirin was both a quick learner and a relentless questioner. Her curiosity was insatiable, yet there was a guardedness to her, a wall that even the most profound discussions couldn't breach. For my part, I was equally fascinated by her. The Ashari concept of resonance intrigued me, a belief that all life was connected through an invisible web of energy. They viewed emotions not as internal, personal experiences, but as vibrations that rippled outward, affecting everything around them. It was a philosophy both alien and strangely familiar, echoing human ideas of empathy and interconnectedness. Despite our intellectual rapport, our personal interactions remained formal, almost cold. Sirin carried herself with an air of detachment, her bioluminescent patterns rarely betrayed anything more than calm professionalism. It was clear that she saw this partnership as a duty, not a connection. Things changed during an unplanned excursion. I had invited Sirin to visit a local art museum, hoping to show her a slice of humanity's creative spirit. To my surprise, she accepted. We spent hours wandering through the exhibits, her silver eyes scanning every painting, sculpture, and installation with a mixture of curiosity and critique. At one point, we stood before a massive mural depicting the cosmos, stars, galaxies, and nebulae swirled together in a riot of color, a celebration of the universe's beauty and chaos. Sirin's gaze lingered on it, her bioluminescence shifting to a soft, ethereal glow. "It's beautiful," she said quietly, her voice tinged with a rare note of emotion. "It reminds me of home." "Your world must be incredible," I replied, captivated by the vulnerability in her expression. She turned to me, her silver eyes meeting mine. "It is, but it is also fragile. That is why we came here, human, to ensure that neither of our worlds falls into ruin." Her words struck a chord in me. For the first time, I saw not an alien diplomat, but a being with hopes, fears, and dreams. The distance between us felt smaller, the barriers less insurmountable. When the Ashari delegation announced the arrival of Sirin's family, I expected a group of distinguished diplomats or scholars. What I didn't expect was an entourage that exuded equal parts regality and warmth. Sirin's mother, Kaith Vora, was a commanding presence, her bioluminescent patterns shimmering in hues of deep gold and violet. Her father, Varen, carried himself with quiet dignity, his voice a low, soothing hum that seemed to resonate in the air around him. Accompanying them were Sirin's younger sibling, Iari, and two elder cousins, both of whom radiated a quiet curiosity about humanity. The Voras were not just a family, they were one of the most influential lineages in Ashari society, renowned for their contributions to science, diplomacy, and the arts. Their arrival marked a significant moment in the alliance, and the pressure to represent humanity in the best light was palpable. The formal dinner arranged to welcome them was a grand affair, held in a glass-domed hall that offered a panoramic view of Earth's night sky. The stars above twinkled in harmony with the glow of the Ashari's bioluminescence, creating a surreal atmosphere. Human dignitaries and Ashari delegates mingled cautiously, their conversations filled with tentative questions and polite laughter. I was seated next to Sirin, whose usual composure seemed strained under the weight of her family's scrutiny. She exchanged formalities with her mother and father, her tone polite but distant. It was clear there were unspoken tensions between them, though I couldn't discern their nature. About halfway through the meal, Kaith raised her glass, her golden patterns glowing brighter as she spoke to the union of our species. "May this alliance bring prosperity and understanding to both our worlds." The room echoed with murmurs of agreement and the clinking of glasses, but then Kaith's tone shifted, becoming more pointed. "Such an alliance, however, must be built on trust, unity, and above all, shared purpose. It is our belief that nothing symbolizes such unity more than an interspecies union." The hall fell silent. My heart skipped a beat as Kaith's gaze turned towards Sirin and me. I could feel the weight of every eye in the room. Sirin's mother continued, both commanding and warm, "We propose that you and this human, Aelric Voss, enter into a union, a partnership that will serve as a beacon of hope for our people." I choked on my drink, nearly knocking over my glass in the process. The human dignitaries looked equally stunned, their expressions ranging from confusion to thinly veiled outrage. Sirin's patterns pulsed with an iridescent mix of embarrassment and frustration. "Mother," she began, her voice tight, "this is neither the time nor the place, nonsense." Kaith interrupted with a serene smile, "The time is perfect. You've spoken highly of Alaric's intellect and character, surely he is a suitable choice." I wanted to protest, to declare that this was ridiculous, but words failed me. The room seemed to blur around me, and all I could focus on was Sirin's expression, her usually calm demeanor cracking under the weight of her mother's proposition. After what felt like an eternity, the dinner resumed, though the atmosphere was palpably tense. Sirin avoided my gaze for the rest of the evening, her posture was rigid and her responses curt. I, too, remained silent, grappling with the absurdity of the situation. Later that evening, Sirin appeared at my quarters unannounced. Her usually serene features were marked by tension, her bioluminescent patterns flickering like a stormy sea. "We need to talk," she said without preamble, stepping inside before I could respond. I gestured for her to sit, though she remained standing, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the floor. "My family," she began, her voice sharp with frustration, "believes that a union between us would solidify our alliance. They think it's a symbolic gesture, one that will inspire trust and cooperation." "And what do you think?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral despite the chaos swirling in my mind. Sirin looked up, her silver eyes meeting mine for the first time. I saw vulnerability in her expression, a crack in the armor she so carefully maintained. "I think it's absurd," she admitted. "We barely know each other." And yet she hesitated. "There is logic to their reasoning. Our species values unity and collaboration, and my family believes that this gesture will set an example for both worlds." I let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through my hair. "So, what, you expect me to just go along with this, marry someone I've only known for a few weeks?" "I expect nothing, Aelric," she said defensively. "But my family is persistent. If we refuse outright, it could create tension, perhaps even jeopardize the alliance." I stood pacing the room as I tried to process her words. The idea of marrying an alien, a woman who, despite our growing rapport, was still largely a mystery to me, felt ludicrous, and yet I couldn't deny the weight of the situation. "What if we compromise?" I suggested, stopping to face her. "A trial engagement of sorts. We spend time together, learn about each other's cultures, and see if this even makes sense. If it doesn't work, we can call it off." Sirin raised an eyebrow, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to a thoughtful shade of blue. "A pragmatic approach," she said. "I suppose it could appease my family, for now." "And what about you?" I asked, my voice softer. "What do you want, Sirin?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I want what is best for my people, and for yours." It wasn't the answer I had hoped for, but it was enough to convince me that we were, at the very least, on the same page. We agreed to present the idea to her family, though neither of us could predict how they, or the rest of the world, would react. As Sirin left my quarters that night, she paused at the door, turning back to face me. "This will not be easy, human," she said, her tone both serious and strangely gentle. "But perhaps it will be worth it." Her words lingered in the air long after she was gone, a mix of challenge and promise that set the stage for the uncertain journey ahead. The announcement of our trial engagement was met with reactions as polarized as Earth's weather patterns. Human media exploded with headlines ranging from a love story for the ages to the alien union conspiracy. Protesters gathered outside government buildings, waving signs with slogans like, "Protect Humanity's Legacy," and "No to Intergalactic Entanglement," while, on the other hand, there were supporters, romantic idealists who saw our arrangement as the first step toward a brighter, unified future. The Ashari were equally divided, while some viewed the union as a visionary act of diplomacy, others whispered doubts about diluting their cultural traditions. During one of our shared meals, I asked, "Do your people always approach diplomacy like this?" Sirin's younger sibling smiled mischievously, their luminescence flickering in a playful pattern. "No, Aelric. This is a first, you should feel honored or terrified." I managed a weak laugh, but the truth was, I felt both. The first step in our engagement was simple in theory but daunting in practice. Immersing ourselves in each other's cultures, Sirin and I were tasked with not just observing but experiencing what made our species unique. We began with Earth. I took her to the heart of human civilization, starting in the crowded streets of New York City. She wore a cloak that dimmed her bioluminescence, though her striking features still drew curious stares. At first, she seemed overwhelmed by the chaos, the blaring car horns, the towering skyscrapers, the sheer density of life, but then something shifted. We visited a jazz club, where she became transfixed by the music, her patterns glowing softly in rhythm with the saxophone melody. "Your species," she murmured, "has a way of capturing emotion in sound. It is raw, unrefined, and yet so beautiful." Next, we explored the quieter side of humanity. I took her to a small village where the stars blanketed the sky like a tapestry. We sat by a crackling fire, surrounded by the scent of pine and the sound of crickets. Sirin leaned back, her silver eyes reflecting the constellations. "This," she said softly, "reminds me of home." Her words stirred something in me, a yearning to see her world, to understand the place that had shaped her. When it was Sirin's turn to guide me, I felt like a child stepping into a dream. Her ship took us to the Ashari's floating embassy, a magnificent structure suspended above the Pacific Ocean. Its architecture defied gravity, with spiraling towers that seemed to grow organically, glowing with soft hues that shifted like the aurora borealis. Sirin introduced me to resonance, the foundation of Ashari culture. It wasn't just a philosophy but a way of life. Every action, every word, every emotion was seen as a vibration that contributed to the harmony or dissonance of the universe. The Ashari's ability to physically express these vibrations through their bioluminescence made their emotions visible, a concept both fascinating and intimidating. "Here," Sirin said, handing me a small crystalline instrument, "try to play something." The instrument, called a viara, emitted soft, haunting tones when touched. My clumsy attempts at music made Sirin laugh, a sound so rare and melodic it felt like a reward. "You're not terrible," she said, her patterns glowing with mirth for a human. Her teasing brought a warmth to our dynamic that had been absent before. For the first time, I felt a genuine connection, unburdened by the weight of obligation. One of the most profound moments came during an Ashari ritual called the Luminaris. It was an annual celebration of unity, where individuals shared their life stories through patterns of light and sound. Sirin, ever the pragmatist, seemed hesitant to participate. "I've never been one for theatrics," she admitted, her patterns dimming in embarrassment. "Maybe it's not about theatrics," I suggested, "maybe it's about connection." My words seemed to resonate with her. That night, she stood before a gathering of Ashari and humans, her bioluminescence weaving a story of her life through her patterns. I saw glimpses of her childhood, her struggles with family expectations, her moments of triumph and doubt. It was raw, vulnerable, and breathtakingly beautiful. When it was my turn, I had no glowing patterns or resonant hums to rely on. Instead, I spoke from the heart, recounting my journey, the losses that had shaped me, the curiosity that had driven me, and the unexpected connection I had found with Sirin. My words felt inadequate compared to the Ashari's luminous artistry, but the way Sirin's eyes softened told me they had reached her. As the weeks passed, our interactions grew more natural, less like a diplomatic experiment and more like a genuine partnership. Sirin began to let her guard down, revealing flashes of humor, vulnerability, and even warmth. I, in turn, found myself drawn to her in ways I hadn't anticipated. She wasn't just an alien or a diplomat, she was a person, one who challenged and inspired me in equal measure. One evening, as we walked along the embassy's glowing corridors, she turned to me and asked, "Do you think this could work?" "What do you mean?" I asked. Though I expected, I already knew this, she said, gesturing between us. "Our union, our worlds, can they truly coexist?" I hesitated, searching for the right words. "I think," I said slowly, "that it won't be easy, but the best things in life never are. And maybe we're not so different after all." Sirin's bioluminescence glowed softly, her patterns shifting into a form I was beginning to recognize as hope. "Perhaps you're right, human." By the end of our cultural exchange, we had crossed a threshold. What had begun as an arrangement of necessity was transforming into something deeper, yet the journey ahead remained fraught with challenges. The human world was skeptical, the Ashari Council impatient, and our own uncertainties still lingered in the shadows. Still, for the first time, I felt that this improbable union might just succeed, not because it was logical or strategic, but because, against all odds, we were beginning to understand each other, and in that understanding I saw the flicker of something that could change not just our lives, but the course of history. The bond we had begun to forge was tested almost immediately after the cultural exchange. News of our engagement had spread across the globe and beyond, stirring up emotions that neither of us could ignore. On Earth, protests against the Union grew louder, with factions claiming that I had betrayed humanity's legacy. Whispers of alien corruption filled the airwaves, and journalists hounded me wherever I went, their cameras flashing like invasive lightning strikes. Sirin, too, faced pressure. The Ashari Council, which had initially supported the idea, began to voice concerns. They feared that the union might not symbolize unity but instead highlight irreconcilable differences. Sirin's family remained outwardly supportive, but the strain showed in her mother's measured words and her father's uncharacteristic silences. Our time together became increasingly complicated. Every gesture, every word, seemed to carry the weight of two civilizations. Arguments became more frequent, sparked by frustrations we couldn't always articulate. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting with human diplomats, I turned to Sirin as we left the council chambers. "Do you ever wonder if this is worth it?" I asked, my voice heavier than I intended. She stopped mid-stride, her bioluminescence flickering faintly. "You think I don't?" she replied sharply. "Every day I ask myself if this is what I want, or simply what is expected of me." Her words stung, not because they were unkind, but because they mirrored my own doubts. "So, what's the answer?" I asked quietly. She looked at me, her silver eyes clouded with frustration and something deeper, something like pain. "I don't know, Elric, and that terrifies me." Her admission hung between us like an unspoken truth, one we were too afraid to confront. For the first time since we had begun this journey, I felt the chasm between us widening, the differences in our worlds and our expectations threatened to pull us apart. The breaking point came during a joint event meant to celebrate the alliance. The Ashari had prepared a display of their technological marvels, while humanity showcased its achievements in art and culture. It should have been a night of celebration, but tensions were running high. Protesters gathered outside the venue, their chants echoing through the night, while inside, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken apprehension. As we walked through the exhibits, Sirin and I kept a measured distance, our earlier arguments still fresh in our minds. The tension between us didn't go unnoticed. One of the Ashari Council members approached Sirin, his voice low but pointed. "You've allowed yourself to become distracted," he said, his bioluminescence shifting to a critical shade of orange. "This union was meant to strengthen our people, not weaken you." Sirin stiffened, her patterns dimming in response. "I am fulfilling my role, counselor," she replied, her tone clipped. "But perhaps the expectations placed upon us were unrealistic," the counselor observed. His gaze flicked to me, his expression unreadable. "Humans are emotional creatures, impulsive and unpredictable. Be careful, Sirin, that you do not lose yourself in their chaos." His words struck a nerve, not just in Sirin, but in me as well. Before I could stop myself, I stepped forward. "With all due respect," I said, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath it, "we may be emotional, but that doesn't make us lesser. If anything, it's our emotions that drive us to connect, to build bridges where none existed before." The counselor's bioluminescence flickered in disdain, but Sirin's gaze softened, if only for a moment. Still, the damage was done. That night, we argued again, the weight of the counselor's words pushing us further apart. "You didn't have to defend me, Sirin," she said, her voice rising in frustration. "I can handle my own people." "I wasn't defending you," I shot back. "I was defending us. Or does that not matter to you anymore?" Her patterns flashed a sharp, angry red, a rare and unsettling sight. You think this is easy for me? You think I don't question everything about this, about us, every single day? Then why are we even doing this? I demanded, my voice cracking. If you don't believe in us, then what's the point? Her silence was deafening. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the dimly lit corridor. For the first time, I wondered if this experiment, this impossible dream of unity, was doomed to fail. The days that followed were a blur of strained interactions and hollow gestures. We went through the motions, presenting a united front for the sake of appearances, but the distance between us grew wider with each passing moment. I found myself retreating into my work, while Sirin withdrew into her own thoughts, her bioluminescence dimmer than I had ever seen. I began to question everything, our connection, our purpose, even my place in this grand experiment. But just when it seemed that all hope was lost, an unexpected crisis forced us to confront the truth about ourselves and each other. The crisis came without warning. A powerful storm, unlike anything Earth had seen before, began to brew over the Pacific Ocean. At first it was dismissed as a freak weather event, but it quickly became clear that this was something far more dangerous. The storm's intensity defied natural explanation, its winds ripping through coastal cities while massive tidal waves threatened to submerge entire islands. Scientists scrambled for answers, but it was the Ashari who uncovered the truth. The storm was a result of a subtle, but catastrophic imbalance in Earth's magnetic fields, exacerbated by the introduction of advanced Ashari technology. It was an unintended consequence of their presence, a resonance dissonance, as they called it, one that could spiral out of control if not addressed immediately. Sirin and I were summoned to an emergency council meeting aboard the Ashari floating embassy. The room was tense, the bioluminescent patterns of the Ashari delegates flickering in anxious hues, and human representatives looked visibly shaken, their voices strained as they argued over solutions. "This is your technology," one of the human scientists said, his tone accusatory as he addressed the Ashari. "You need to fix this, and we will," Sirin replied, her voice calm but firm, "but we cannot do so without your cooperation. This is a shared crisis, and it requires a shared solution." The council fell silent as Sirin's words hung in the air, her bioluminescence glowing with a steady, determined light, a stark contrast to the chaotic patterns around her. For the first time in days, I saw a glimpse of the woman I had come to admire, the leader who believed in unity despite the odds. Sirin turned to me, her silver eyes searching mine. "Elric," she said, her voice softer now, "you understand your world better than any of us. We need your insight." The storm had fractured more than just the atmosphere, it had fractured the fragile trust between our species. But in that moment, I realized that trust could still be rebuilt if we were willing to fight for it. The solution required an unprecedented level of collaboration. The Ashari proposed a plan to stabilize the magnetic fields using a combination of their resonance technology and Earth's own natural resources. It was risky, requiring precise synchronization and a deep understanding of both human and Ashari systems. Sirin and I were at the center of it all. We worked side by side, translating between the two teams and ensuring that every detail was executed flawlessly. Though the tension between us remained, it was tempered by a renewed sense of purpose. This was bigger than our personal conflicts, this was about saving two worlds. As the storm intensified, we moved to the heart of the operation, a massive resonance chamber aboard the Ashari ship. The chamber was a marvel of alien engineering, its walls pulsing with energy that seemed to hum in tune with the universe itself. At its center stood the stabilization device, a crystalline structure that glowed with an otherworldly light. "This is it," Sirin said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "If we succeed, the storm will dissipate, if we fail, we won't." I interrupted, my voice firmer than I felt, "We can do this together." Her gaze lingered on me for a moment, and I saw something in her expression that I hadn't seen in days: hope. It was a fragile thing, but it was enough to steady my resolve. The operation began with a delicate calibration of the resonance frequencies. Sirin and I stood at opposite ends of the chamber, each responsible for monitoring and adjusting the system's output. The air was thick with tension as the device began to hum, its glow intensifying with each passing second. "Steady," Sirin called out, her bioluminescence shifting to a calming shade of blue. "We need to align the frequencies exactly." "I'm on it," I replied, my hands moving over the controls, sweat beading on my forehead as I focused on the readings, the numbers blurring together in my mind. Outside, the storm raged with renewed ferocity, its winds howling like a living thing, the ship trembled under the force, and I felt a pang of fear. "What if this doesn't work? What if we fail?" I whispered. "Trust me, Elric," Sirin's voice broke through my thoughts, steady and reassuring, "we can do this." Her words anchored me, and bit by bit, the frequencies began to align, their hum rising to a harmonious crescendo. The glow of the device became blinding, filling the chamber with a light so pure it seemed to erase the shadows. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the storm outside began to weaken, the winds died down, the waves receded, and the clouds parted to reveal a sky that was calm and clear. A collective sigh of relief swept through the chamber. We did it. In the aftermath of the storm, something shifted between Sirin and me. The crisis had reminded us of what truly mattered, not the expectations of others or the obstacles we faced, but the connection we had forged despite it all. That night, as we stood on the deck of the Ashari ship, watching the stars shimmer above the calm ocean, Sirin turned to me, her patterns glowing with a soft, warm light, and there was a vulnerability in her expression that took my breath away. "Elric," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I was wrong to doubt us. You've shown me that this union, our union, can be more than just a symbol. It can be real." I reached for her hand, my fingers brushing against her cool, luminescent skin. "It already is," I replied, my voice steady. "We faced the worst together, and we came out stronger. That has to mean something." She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up the night. "Perhaps this is only the beginning." As I held her hand, the ocean stretching endlessly before us, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. For the first time, I believed that we could build something lasting, not just for ourselves, but for the future of our worlds. In that moment, the stars seemed closer than ever. The days following the storm felt like stepping into a new chapter. The successful stabilization of Earth's magnetic fields marked not just a scientific triumph, but a turning point in the fragile alliance between humans and Ashari. Skepticism still lingered, but the shared crisis had begun to sow seeds of mutual respect. For Sirin and me, however, the aftermath was more personal. Our relationship, once mired in doubt and obligation, now felt unshackled. The storm had stripped away the pretense, forcing us to confront the raw, unvarnished truth of what we meant to each other. We were no longer just representatives of our species or pawns in a grand political game, we were partners, bound by something far more profound.